Welcome to Beyond Words Presents. Today we are here with the founder of UGG Australia, Brian Smith. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you, Whitney.
And we're thrilled to be publishing his upcoming book called Birth of a Brand, in which he depicts, very, very honestly, I must say, the entire journey that he took between, well, really the initial thoughts about starting UGG and then to its fruition and also to its eventual sale to Deckers. And it's not the prettiest journey. as in any creation of any business. So we're really excited to have you here and to talk with you a little bit about what you learned. So I just want to make sure everybody out there who's watching knows you can participate in the conversation as well. If you have any questions for Brian, and he's a great resource to ask questions of if you're looking at starting your own business, you can use the hashtag BWPresents, and you can also use the Google Hangouts app. And be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, and also follow us on Twitter as well. So, Brian, my first question actually comes born of an entire lifetime of almost an entire lifetime of seeing people walk around with these sheepskin boots. Why sheepskin boots?
Okay, well, there's a couple of good answers. The first one is that they are so comfortable. But that wasn't the case. They were always comfortable, but it wasn't known in America when I first started importing them. When we hit the streets in California, my buddy visited probably 1,000 shoe stores and didn't get a single order because they all said, "Why on earth are you wearing sheepskin in California? It doesn't get cold here." And so we tried a trade show in New York thinking that that'd be different over there, and nobody understood what it was again. And that was when I realized that I had started a business without doing enough research. And what turned out was that Americans don't understand sheepskin like Australians, because in Australia they know it's rugged, it's washable, you can get it wet, you can get mud on it, it doesn't matter. Whereas in America it's hot, it's delicate. It's you can't take it out of the ski resorts because you'll get mud or slush, and so there was this incredible misperception of how good sheepskin is. But for everybody who's tried on a pair, and that's millions of people now, thank God, the most common thing I ever heard was, "Oh my God, these are so comfortable." So that's the answer right there.
So how did you educate the world as to how sheepskin actually, how did you educate America as to how sheepskin really works? Because I have to tell you, my perception of sheepskin sounds a little bit like that old perception. So I would love to have that shifted by you, the one to do it.
Yeah. Well, it was very slow. After that New York show, we came back to California, and I realized that the only people who really knew sheepskin boots were the surfers, and it was because they'd all been down to us, or many had been down to Australia, and they all bought 4 or 5 pairs back for their buddies. So we switched from going to shoe stores to surf shops, and they all said, "Oh man, fantastic! Yeah, we know all about those. If you start that company, you are going to make a fortune, And so my buddy and I got this so many times from all the different retailers that we raised about 20 grand, and we bought 500 pairs in, and we went back on the road now with all of our product, and we went back to exactly the same stores, and the first one I walked into said, "Oh, Brian, great, you're going to make a fortune with those boots, but we couldn't sell them in our store. We just sell surfboards and shorts and sandals, and there's no way our customers could afford UGG boots." And then I went to the next store and the same thing, and the next store, "You're going to make a fortune, Brian, but." And after we wrapped up our first season, which was like the end of November and early December, we had sold 28 pairs the first year. And my buddy and I looked up at the wall in my bedroom, which was 500 pairs of boots, and going, "Oh my God, what have we got into?" So it wasn't a quick start.
So what did you do after that? Because like everybody, and I read in your book, it's like you start a company and you're like, all of a sudden, magically, somehow everything's going to work out and you're going to start selling hundreds of pieces at a time or even thousands of pieces at a time. And one of the things that you say specifically in your book is that you can't give birth to adults.
Yeah, that's for something I learned over at the. It took 2 or 3 years of trying to make it work in the surf shops, and the sales were about $30,000, each year, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get into the mall stores, because that to me was the pinnacle of success, and it was about 3 years of $30,000, running ads of models on the beach at Wind and Sea, with the perfect shoes and the perfect hair, and $30,000, and the next year I'd increase the budget doing the same thing, $30,000, and I ended up being in the buying office of Montgomery Ward, which is a big shoe retailer in department stores back then, and I gave my best sales pitch, and the buyer just looked at me and he said, "Brian, why are you here?"
Yeah.
And I went, because I want to get an order for California stores. And he goes, "Brian, don't you get it? We're the elephants. We never move until the mice are running around under our feet." And I went, "Oh my God," I got it instantly, because that meant the mall stores were not going to move until all the specialty stores were going crazy. So when I got back to California, I was having a drink after work with one of my shoes, the surf shop retailers who was doing well, and I explained the situation, and he just called out to the back of the room to all these little surf grommets that came out, and he says, "Hey, you guys, what do you think of UGG?" And they all just said, "Oh, those UGGs, man, they're so fake. Have you seen the models? They can't surf." And bam, I knew again that I'm sending the wrong image to my target market. So within a couple of weeks, I'd found a couple of young pro surfers, and I started following them on some of the classic surf walks, Black's Beach and Trestles in San Onofre, and every reader who surfs has probably surfed those spots and knows just how authentic it is. And within a couple of weeks of running the first ad, the sales were going crazy, and by the end of Christmas, we'd done $400,000 in sales, and it was all because of changing that image. But more importantly, all the moms who didn't have a clue that they were sold in surf shops were walking the malls to all the big department stores going, "Do you have Uggs? No. Do you have Uggs? What are Uggs?" And so we finally got the mice moving by changing the image, and that was probably the first big breakthrough in the company.
That's awesome. So, and one of the things that it just reminds me of is in the very beginning of your book, you mentioned the fact that when you first started the company way back in the very beginning with $500 in your pocket and your accounting degree,
right,
you didn't really have a solid business plan. It was more kind of a, here's some stuff that we want to do. Would you recommend that to some entrepreneurs, like kind of feeling it out first, or would you really recommend that they have a very clear business plan to move forward with?
That's a fantastic point, because you're right. I had no plan whatsoever. I just knew that these were really popular in Australia, and California was exactly like Australia, and so therefore they're going to work here. But the point that the question raises a big issue, and that is, I've come to believe that to be a successful entrepreneur, you must have some level of ignorance or even innocence about going into it. It's got to be like a passion, because if you knew all the obstacles ahead, you would never go into business. You would just get a job, right?
Yeah.
But by had I done a business plan, like I know you can download them from the internet now, and had I known what problems I would have with the seasonality, and how that affected the cash flow, had I realized just how much inventory I needed to have, for me to have like one person come in the store who's a size 7, I have to have everything from 5 to 12, because I don't know what size is coming in the door, right? So the huge requirement for inventory, an expensive product, seasonal again. Had I known all of that, I never would have started. But again, because I didn't know all that, UGG is now a billion-dollar brand,
Mm.
right? And it started out of pure ignorance.
Yeah, and
Not pure ignorance, a little bit of calculated ignorance. Yeah.
well, and it's the question of you can lay out this beautiful, have everything accounted for business plan, and so you go and you start to execute it, and by step two, something is completely different, and sometimes it's really hard for people to adjust their course when they have that full plan for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
But it seems like what you kind of did is you sort of felt it out as you went and went in
Yeah.
the direction that felt right at the moment and discovered a lot.
Exactly. And do you recall earlier you mentioned you can't give birth to adults?
Yes, yes.
Well, that became my theme after. It took a long time to figure it out, but I now realize that every single business that exists, or movement, or religion, started with somebody conceiving it first, and then they took some action to give birth. In my case, I bought 6 pairs of boots in with my $500. That was the birth of UGG in America.
Mm-hmm.
And then the problem is that then after that birth, the infant just lies there. And there's
Mm.
no amount of overfeeding it or jiggling it around or praying. The infant is not going to get up and go to college. It has to lie there as an infant. And this is the most dangerous phase for beginning entrepreneurs, because they think because it's not moving and it's not successful as all the other things they see on the marketplace or the TV, they think that they're failing, when in fact the infant is just being an infant. But then with a bit more time and attention, it'll start toddling, which is a really cute stage, but it's dangerous because you can't take your eyes off it. And then it'll eventually hit the youth, which is like consistent sales, consistent marketing, consistent billing, payables, everything's great. That's the best stage of every business. But if it's a really good product or it's a really good service, it'll hit the teenage phase when it just wants to be everywhere at once. All the parties are happening and your product wants to be there, and it's very easy to lose control of your company, just like it's hard to control your teenagers. But eventually the accountants and the administrators come in and put down all the controls, and the expenses and all of that sort of stuff gets taken care of, and then it becomes a mature business. But yeah, that infancy stage where most entrepreneurs start out is a very, very trying part of the thing. But if you do believe in your product and you just keep working at it, eventually it'll take off.
So I'm curious, do you feel like your passion needs to be for being an entrepreneur, or do you feel like your passion really needs to be for the product that you're putting out there in the world?
Yeah, there's no money in just being an entrepreneur. you have to love what you're doing. And a lot of entrepreneurs, everybody thinks entrepreneur, Richard Branson, millionaire, Brian Smith, God, that's really not where it's at. Most entrepreneurs have a little business, on a street, maybe in a strip mall, and they love what they do, and they are having a ball. And that really is the pinnacle of being an entrepreneur. And it's having no boss. It's having no committees that you have to get approvals from. It's just doing your thing and figuring out how to make it grow. Now, having said that, if it is a little business in a strip mall, there is absolutely nothing to stop that growing to being a billion-dollar business. It all depends on the product. It depends on your skill of marketing and taking it out there. I mean, Subway was a single sandwich shop once.
Yes.
And now it's a billion-dollar business. So if you've got the right product and the right desire, you can always find the people who will help you take it big.
Well, and the reason I asked the question is because it seems like they are so hand in hand. Like there's a certain amount of love for being an entrepreneur that has to come with the love of the product. Because for me, I've thought of a million different things. I'm like, oh, that'd be a really good business, and nothing happens. Like I don't take it anywhere. I don't try to do anything with it. Maybe partially because of what you were saying in terms of once you know everything that's involved in starting a business, you just set it aside and don't go any further. So I just wonder like the degree to which you have to really, really want to be an entrepreneur as well as really, really wanting to get this product out into the
Yeah.
world.
And would you believe that's the reason I wrote the book?
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Over the last 20 years, I have seen so many people who said exactly what you just did.
Hmm.
Oh, I've got this great idea, and then they'll say, but I don't know how to get a business license.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll go, give me a break. I've never had a business license. You know, it's like, oh, I've got this great idea, but you know, I grew up without an education in marketing, and I go, who cares if you have the idea and you really believe that it's something you want to follow.
Hmm.
You know, and there's so much of society holds us back, like, oh, you can never do that. You know, from birth, oh, don't have such high expectations. You're not like that. You can't do that. But once you really get the bug and you just say, damn it, I really like this. That's where the ignorance comes in.
Yes.
I'm just gonna do it anyway. And I think the best advice in getting back to that's why I wrote the book is because I wanted people to break out of that paralysis
Hmm.
and just look at me who just didn't have a clue, and I made it work. But it shows the paths that you have to go through. Every entrepreneur will go through the same things, even if it's programming a business or you know, whatever. So the reason that book to me is a roadmap for potential entrepreneurs, or it's an inspiration, is just purely to get you to follow that little dream or that little spark within you.
I love that. And so everybody can see it. I love the cover. I think the cover turned out beautifully. This is the birth of the brand. This actually isn't out yet. It is not out until December 2nd. So you can actually order it. You can pre-order it, and it's at our website, www.beyondword.com/UGG, in honor of the beautiful UGG boots on the cover. And you will get 30% off the retail price, so it's going to be $16.80. And they're also going to be signed. And I don't know that Brian knows this just yet, but we're going to send him a whole box of books so that he can sign them. And you guys will have a signed copy of The Birth of the Brand, about the start of the UGG boot craze, signed by the founder of UGG boots, which is just like absolutely amazing.
Fantastic.
So,
I'm looking forward to that.
absolutely. And as I said, it's like as I started reading through this, I found a lot of really great insights. And I love what you say, Brian, because I have definitely told myself that I can't start a business unless I have an MBA. Like I have to go get an MBA before I could start a business. And so it's almost become an excuse for me to not do anything, because I'm just like, yeah, that takes a lot of work and a lot of money, and I don't have it right now.
Yeah, I can take some pressure off you. Not that I want you to leave Beyond Words, because you're doing a really good job there. But if you have that little inkling for an idea, start it at night or start it at the weekends, and don't quit your main job, right? Because the only time you should quit your main job is if it's getting in the way of the business that's getting too big for you to handle and you need more time to do it. So that's probably the best thing, a bit of advice for those people who do have a job and maybe responsibilities, you know, kids at home or others they're caring for. You can't just be a gambler like I was. You know, I had no ties whatsoever, so it was easy for me to live on the breadline for so many years. But you know, if you have responsibilities, start it off as a hobby on the side, and eventually it'll just, I mean, it's just like a baby. You can't stop it growing.
Well, and you mentioned earlier that you started out going to surf shops and selling, you know, some boots to surf shops, and then you had that great breakout with the insight from the Montgomery Ward people, and then also from the, what did you call them, Grommets?
The Grommets are the little, you know, 12 to 16-year-old kids that
the really young ones, yeah.
Shops, you know.
The insights from both the big corporation and also the people really down on the ground floor, your customers. And so how did you take that next step? How did you get it into those mall stores? How did you make that dream come true?
Apart from you know, finding that surfer image, I really cracked the Southern California market by getting through the surf. You know, I got all the mice in the specialty stores and surf shops, but that nobody in Minnesota has read a surf magazine. So the question became, how do I get it back there? Well, skiing was a good one, and as skiing sort of moved over into snowboarding, there was a big shift from surfing into snowboarding. So that was a sort of an automatic one. Took 4 or 5 years for that market to develop. And back east, I was traveling with my sales reps, and I used to ask all the retailers, well, what do the kids do here in the winter, for sport? And they said, well, the big thing is hockey. And I went, oh my God, the hockey rinks are like 40 degrees. The kids have to wear some sort of footwear and then change and then something else to put on afterwards. So it was perfect. And the mums who go watch the kids have to sit in 40-degree temperatures. So I started advertising in hockey magazines, and I used to run a little competition, the Hockey Mum of the Week, so all the kids would write in for a free pair of UGG boots for their moms, and it really started to take off, not so much from the hockey players, but all the mums. They started going to the specialty sporting goods stores where we were selling them, but then they were going to, Dayton's and all of the other big department stores in the Midwest, going, hey, we want Uggs, and that's how we cracked into the department stores there. But I think the really, really big breakthrough came after that. We were like segmenting all of these different sort of sports, but there was no one big image, and I wanted to create the image of casual comfort footwear. And just as a fluke, I was on a plane flight back from New York or something from a trade show, and I was sitting next to a girl who was reading People magazine and Us magazine, and I was sort of looking over her shoulder at all of these stars seen photographed on the streets, and it would describe what they're wearing and whose brands they were wearing and everything. And I thought, my God, that's a great market, but you can't just send a pair of boots to a star because it'll never get there.
Yeah.
So what I did is I found out that there was this category in Hollywood called stylists. And these were like the makeup artists and the hairstylists and the wardrobe people and all the different people who service the movie industry and the TV industry. And so I found a mailing list for all of these stylists, and I sent about 400 letters out and said, hey, if you want a free pair of UGG boots, give me a call. Well, I only got about 40 people to call up, and I sent them all their own pair of UGG boots. But within weeks, they were, I'd get, hey, I was doing so-and-so star's hair, and they asked if they could have a pair of UGG boots. Here's her size. So we'd start sending them out, and it took, just like you can't give birth to adults, right? It took a while for it to catch on, but once it started getting momentum, like every night we'd be watching TV and there'd be somebody on a sitcom wearing a pair of UGG boots, right? Or even in the movies, like I remember I was watching Eyes Wide Shut, and there's Tom Cruise with his feet up and a pair of UGG boots like for 5 minutes, and there was all these things really, really started to take off. And it was right near the end of, just before I sold the company, that we got a call from one of these people. It was Trudy Styler, who was Sting's wife, and she wanted a perfect pair to send to a girl who, she'd just been to this seminar, and she said, well, here's where to send them, Brian. And she goes, Oprah, care of Oprah Winfrey,
Oh,
and that was like the beginning. That was right at the end of my ownership of the business, because I was selling it at that time, and the new company, Deckers Corporation, were able to translate that into a really good relationship, and we got on Oprah's Picks for Christmas and Oprah's Favorite Things, 20, 30 minutes on TV with nothing but UGG boots, and that was when it really became a worldwide phenomenon.
That's amazing. So why did you decide to sell? What was it that had you take that next step?
Well, there are two reasons. One is that I'm just like a serial entrepreneur. I love starting businesses, and I love helping entrepreneurs, and I love the freedom and the freewheeling ability to make decisions and take risks. And if I want to, make a decision that I know I'm going to be poor for a while, I can do it. But in like, the company had got so big, we were about 15 million, and we had a big structure of accountants and management, and I just was just having to be in committees and conferences and on conference calls, and no decisions were being made because we'd have to get a report on this, or we'd need a consultant to do a study on this, and I'm going, God damn it, I've never done that,
Yes.
And so I personally don't operate well in that situation. So the time was right for me to move on.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing was that we looked like we had sales of about 15 million, and it looked like it was going to go to 20, and I hadn't secured the financing. I knew it was going to be a very tough one to finance for the following year, and so the strange thing happened that I had a really good buddy called Doug Otto who he and I started off about the same time. I was selling sheepskin out of the back of my van in Malibu Beach, and he was a couple of vans along, and he was selling his triple-decker sandals, which were like thongs, or flip-flops, which had like pink and yellow and pink sort of rubber, neoprene and thongs, and he called them deckers, like triple-deckers.
Oh, yeah.
And he went on eventually to start a company. He called his company Deckers. And for 15 years, we were building our businesses. And when he took on a license of a sandal called Teva, which I'm sure most of your listeners will have heard of, or Teva, and he took his company public on that brand. And so here I was in the early 95, I think it was, and I've had this humongous season coming up at me. I wasn't sure how I was going to finance it. And Doug had taken his company public. He had 20-30 million bucks in the bank, and we happened to meet at the baggage claim in Atlanta. We were both going to a trade show called the Super Show, and I looked down the other end and saw him, and I got goosebumps, and I thought to myself, oh my God, his business dies every winter and my business dies every summer. And I said, this is a perfect way to merge them and have a year-round business that's financing itself. And so I walked up to him and I said, hey, Doug, I'm looking at getting out. Is there, if ever we're going to do this, now's the time to do it. And we had the accountants talking that afternoon to each other. So it was a very seamless sort of transition.
That's amazing. It's like you'd raised your child, and your child was an adult, and you were kind of sending it off into the world.
That's a fabulous analogy. That's an extension of my can't give birth to adults. Yeah, you're right. It was time to go, and it found a suitor, and off it went to grow in a completely different world. And I must say, the Deckers company that's taken it on. Connie Rishwain is a president there, and she has done an amazing job in building her team, and marketing, product development's been out of control, out of control in a good way, and she's taken it on and made a really, really high-end worldwide brand.
Yeah, I found out that our publicist here in-house actually wore UGG shoes for her wedding. Not boots, but UGG shoes, because they have expanded into that realm as well.
Yeah, they've gone into some fantastic product nowadays, yeah.
That's great. Well, so another question that I had for you is what do you feel makes your story unique? Because we've seen lots of different stories about entrepreneurs and things like that, and I know that, UGG boots just in and of itself makes it unique, because those things, they were everywhere. I remember high school and college. I went to college in Minnesota, and they were everywhere. Everybody had them. But so what about your entrepreneurial story is really something that you want people to pay attention to?
What a lot of people don't know, and especially entrepreneurs starting out don't realize, that the universe is really quite friendly and it's conspiring to work with you. Okay? You don't have to know where you're going to end up before you take your first steps, because that figures itself out as you go along. But the most important thing that kept me keeping on, because every business is going to be full of chaotic moments. You're going to have partners that run away with half your clients, or you're going to have a big customer that bails, and you know, you feel like it's the end. But and in my book, I've got loads and loads of these philosophical statements, right? But the most important one to me is to remember that mostly your most disappointing disappointments become your greatest blessings. And I found this over and over again, that I would look back on things that I thought at the time was a huge disaster, and I'd go, oh my God, thank God that happened, because look where I am now. You know, it forced me to take a different tack, and the result was a much, much better way to run the business. And this happened over and over and over again.
Yeah, could you give me an example?
Okay, one was when I had taken on new investors, and there were 3 of them, and we were all going to own 25% of the business. But I didn't get my 25% until I finished off this little trademark lawsuit that I had going on with another company. And the first day I was out, you know, we moved the whole warehouse up to Anaheim to be with the new guys. And my first day on the road, I went down, and it was in Huntington Surf and Sport. And I walked in the door, you know, just a typical trade visit, you know. And he said, "Hey, Brian, I heard you sold the business." And I went, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I heard you don't own it anymore." And I went, "What?" And I finished up as quick as I could, and I called up Neil at the office, and I said, "Neil, what are you telling people?" He says, "Well, you don't own it anymore." And I said, "Yes, I do. You're my 3 partners." He says, "No, we own the business, and you get yours when you finish the trade." And I immediately just like hit this low spot, because my dream of building this huge corporation one day and having worldwide sales was just like crashed. I wasn't even an owner. And all I was, you know, part of the deal was I was the sales rep for Southern California. And so I went home, and I you know, I used to do a lot of yoga. I still do. And I remember meditating, and I thought, oh, what am I going to do? Am I going to be a business broker or a real estate agent, or, you know I'm never going to go back to accounting. And I thought, you know, I've really come to like sales. And I said, okay, so what can I sell that I'd really like to sell? And I just got all these goosebumps ran all over me again. And I thought, I love selling UGG. And so I just changed my attitude, and instead of being an owner, I just had to bite the bullet and realize, hey, I'm just going to be the UGG salesman. And for 3 years I went on the road, and that first year, you know, I was out there for a month, and I got back to the office, and Neil handed me a check for $5,000, and I looked at it, and he says, "That's your commissions for the month." And I had never pulled 1 cent out of the company before then. And then at the end of the next month, I got a check for $10,000 and another $10,000 after that. And I realized, oh my God, you know, this is pretty good. I haven't done any shipping. I haven't done any receiving. I haven't done any accounting. I haven't done any billing. I haven't done any of the hard work. I've just been out having a ball with all of my retail friends, you know, and all my retailers were becoming my real good buddies. And I realized that wow, this couldn't have turned out better. And that's an example of sometimes your most disappointing disappointments become your greatest blessings. And I felt blessed. And look, as fate would have it, a couple of years later, I owned the business again anyway, 100%.
You never know what's going to happen just around the bend, as they say.
Time is the great fixer of everything. Yeah.
It is. Well, one of the things you were just talking about is how much you loved sales, and I read in your book that at the first prospect of doing sales, because you mentioned it in the book that when you first started the company, your friend that you were starting with was out doing all the sales, and you were going to do all the backroom work, because going out and doing sales was not something that you thought you could do.
Yeah, I was an accountant. I was terrified. My only you know, knowledge of salesmen was at used car yards when I was an auditor, you know, and I'll never forget. You know, when I first started with the surf shops, you know, after I was terrified to go on the road. It probably took me 3 or 4 days to get the courage to do it, but when I did, you know, they all knew about these sheepskin boots, and so bit by bit it was fantastic. And until I got down to South Coast Surf Shop in Ocean Beach, and I went in there and pulled out the sheepskin boots, and and the owner started laughing, and he called his buddy out of the back room who was shaping surfboards, and he says, "Hey, John, there's a guy up here, this Aussie guy trying to sell sheepskin in a surf shop, And I swore I wished I was invisible, because I was all my fears of selling came back. But it turned out he was joking, and he owned a pair, and he was just having fun with me. He turned out to be one of my best friends. Selling at the beginning was a big stretch, but I came to realize just how powerful the sales profession is in America, really in the world, and nothing happens without a sale. I think there's some famous speaker has said that nothing happens without a sale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I want to mention one more time, you can get a signed copy of Brian's not yet released book. December 2nd, is when it's coming out. 30% off, $16.80 at www.beyondword.com/UGG. So be sure to go there and grab your copy of the book. And also, if you have any questions, be sure to submit them via the Google Hangouts app. And so, Brian, one of the things that any entrepreneur, anybody who's starting a company encounters, and you've already kind of mentioned it, is they encounter obstacles. Like for you, one of the things was not wanting to do sales. What is your strongest recommendation for anybody who is starting a business and has encountered their first or their second, third, fourth, fifth obstacle? How to get through it?
Well, I have. Let me see if I can find it here. In the front of my daily planner, I have this little saying that I live by. So I've had that I transfer that to my daily planner every year. I have done for nearly 20 years. And there are 4 little things on it. The first one is feast upon uncertainty. I wish I had a little whiteboard behind me to write these down. Feast upon uncertainty, fatten upon disappointment, enthuse over apparent defeat, and invigorate in the presence of difficulties, right? And those 4 little statements put everything in perspective. Like feasting upon uncertainty, when all those years where I didn't know where I was going to find the financing to build the business, it was very uncertain times, Would I make it through the summer? Very uncertain. But I embraced it. I used to go, bring it on, feast upon uncertainty, bring it on. There's nothing you can do that's going to put me down, And fattening upon disappointment, that means just take it in stride, suck it up, and there's always tomorrow, and disappointing things are always going to happen. Mm. The big one is enthusing in the face of apparent defeat, right? Defeat is not a real thing until the minute you give up. Defeat is always apparent. It's apparent that it's a possibility that I could be defeated, but the minute any time you keep trying. What I like to think of as life is a series, there's no straight up climb in business or life. It's a series of plateaus. You come along and you hit a wall, and there's a good chance for defeat. You can stop. Mm-hmm. But most people will say, oh, how can I get up or around? And they get up to the next plateau and they take off until they hit the next one. But they've just been on a higher plane, and so they climb over that one. And that's what life is. It's climbing these plateaus. First grade, second grade, third grade, and it's just a series of plateaus. And life after school is the same. But instead of exams, you have to face life obstacles. But you can always overcome them. So that enthusing in the face of apparent defeat means just accept that you're always going to have obstacles. There's always going to be answers. Just sort of get used to it. So those are the 4 statements that I think are critical for not just your business, but for every part of your life.
Absolutely. Well, and it sounds like each of them is just asking you to shift your perspective.
Yeah, it's taking control of your own thinking. That's good.
Yeah, and it's like not letting yourself defeat yourself.
Exactly.
That's what I was hearing you saying in enthusing in apparent defeat.
Yeah.
the defeat only exists if you yourself say you have been defeated.
That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah, and that's what people need to remember. You know, there's all sorts of issues that are going to get them down in life, but you know, hey, next week's always a different situation.
Yes. So when you were starting UGG, well, I'm just going to ask this question because I'm curious. Why UGG? Why the name UGG? I even like when I was reading your book, you kind of threw it out there that there was another company that was UGH and you created UGG, but why?
Well, it's a great question. The term has been around Australia for a long, long time, and nobody really knows who invented it. There's lots of theories. You know, there's those on the left say that because they're ugly. There's others that was because they were like they came out during this period of, you know, leather headbands and jackets with big frilly thongs on them, and it was like very Indian, you know, oriented, and there was a, you know, back then it's not politically correct, but the Indians were like UGG, you know, like when they would meet people, and so some people think it was because of that, but nobody really knows. And as far as the trademarking goes, you know, there was a guy, he registered UGH in Australia. I registered UGG here because I was the first one to do it, and that's what, you know, the law follows in America, that if you can create first use and continue it, then you own it. So that's really how the trademark part of it came about. But yeah, I wish I had a good answer for that question. I don't know.
I was just curious because it's something that we in America have never had, and so when it appeared, it seems like such an odd name, but it has become such a brand. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So how important is a name? Well, I know the answer, but how do you determine if you have the right name for a brand? Like, it's such a huge part of branding yourself, and I know that you went through some really significant lawsuits to maintain that brand that you'd created. Yeah. How do you know when it's the right one?
Well, there's a great example in my book. There's two answers to this. I'm going to give you the first one with this example, right? When I got confronted with this person that was using UGHS, I contemplated changing the name. And I thought, you know, Jackaroo, which is like an Australian cowboy, it's called Jackaroos. And but for a couple of years, I'd been sponsoring these young kids in the UGG surf team, right? And they were 12, 14-year-old kids. You know, they weren't like the world's leaders of opinion, but when I eventually approached them and said, hey, listen, I'm going to change the name to Jackaroos, they went, oh, no way, we're not riding for Jackaroos, we want to ride for UGG. And I realized the power of what I'd done just in a short 4 or 5 year period, and how deep that name ran with those young surf kids. And that gave me this surge of energy to fight for the name, right? So that's the first answer. The second answer is, it really doesn't matter as much what the name is, it's how much money you pour into it and how much image you develop around it. And a great example is like the swoosh of Nike, right? If some kid had done that swoosh mark and registered for, you know, barbecue, in a local barbecue shop in Portland or Seattle, wherever, that mark would not be visible today, right? But it just happened that some company put a couple of million, then a couple of billion behind it, and that mark is one of the most powerful marks in the world today. So that's the second part of the answer, is a trademark is worth as much as the visibility you've given it. And to get visibility usually is dollars. You know, for us it was, you know, a lot of luck being on Oprah and a lot of, you know, getting the word out that way. We didn't spend as much dollars as we there's no way we could have afforded to get that exposure, but the point is the amount of exposure is really how strong your trademark is. It doesn't even matter if it doesn't relate to your, well, it should relate to your product if it's a good one, but the swoosh, who would think that's for shoes? It's all about the exposure.
Well, and what you're pointing to leads to my next question, which is, what are the important aspects of a brand? I mean, your book itself, I mean, you titled it Birth of a Brand itself.
Yep.
And so, as you're saying, it's like the brand is really only part the product. How do you, what are those other aspects that you really need to attend to as you're building your brand?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a simple answer. It's your image must portray who your core values of your company are.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone who looks at UGG now thinks impeccable quality, impeccable image, right? And this is to do with the new company more than me, but even though I tried this from day one. The loyalty of customers, I'll give you a great story. There was a time when, I didn't have the product. The partner had died, and my manufacturer went and sold my production to. He teamed up with a different distributor in America, and it was like right at the 11th hour. We were supposed to be shipping to all of our customers in September, and this was August, and I found out that he'd abandoned me because he didn't think I was going to be able to keep the company together with my partner dying, and so I had to scramble and find different suppliers. It was, and I did it in July, August. I found another big tannery in Australia that had a big sheepskin output, and he already had a bunch of manufacturers. So even though I was a month late with my shipments, I was able to bring product in for all of my regular customers. Mm. And the ironic thing is that I stayed alive. My customers never got as much product as they needed. Every week there'd be another 4,000 or 5,000 pairs arrive on a Friday, and my customers would be there waiting with their trucks to take it back to their stores. And it was just like a frantic rush, and we couldn't keep boots on the floor for 24 hours. Well, between Christmas and New Year, the customs broker made a mistake and sent 2,000 pairs of the product that they were marketed under the name Thugs, which I thought was appropriate. He sent them to us, and they sent 1,000 pairs of my boots up to their warehouse in San Clemente. So I arranged to drive up and transfer them over. And when I was driving back, along Camp Pendleton there on the way back to San Diego, it crossed my mind that why is it that we couldn't keep boots in the warehouse for 24 hours, and the Thugs warehouse was absolutely chock-a-block full to the rafters with product. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized the loyalty of all my customers. Mm. And the reason they were loyal is because they wanted the UGG brand because it stood for the customer service, it stood for the quality, it stood for all of those things which I'd developed over the last 10 to 15 years. And that's really what a brand is about. And I am so happy to see that's it's only increased since the day I sold it. It's just every time I see a pair of boots on the street now, I just am in awe of my luck, and I see the image in the advertising, and I see the UGG retail stores. I'm so proud.
Well, and it has been a little while since you sold UGG to Deckers, but because I'm here and I know what you've been doing. I mean, you've been out giving lectures, you've been sharing, you've been to Harvard, and you're going to be going to Harvard here again very soon to give lectures and things like that. And what is it that you're seeing that's happening in the world today that can either add to or is really supported by what you discovered when you were starting UGG?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I see. Because of the internet, there's a tremendous interest in entrepreneurship because it's easier to do it now when you've got all of the tools on the internet. So that's one of the reasons I want to mentor students, and I love talking at colleges. You're right, I was absolutely blessed last weekend to be at Harvard, and just saw how sharp those minds are in the business, school over there. And so that's part of the thing. The other part is that the world's changing, and the baby boomer population is now aging. The 50 and 60-year-olds are stuck out there with no image right now. Mm. They get their AARP letter when they turn 50, and the first thing they do is throw it away because that's not me. How dare you call me retired? Because our generation, and I was the very first year of the baby boom. We are not over the hill. We are not retiring. We are active. We're intelligent. We've got resources, and we're going to start new businesses. And so the other part of the answer is that I want to really start catering to this group that I've called boomerpreneurs, who are the baby boomers hitting that new business phase. Mm-hmm. And I want to create a great image and a new positive lifestyle for those people to join and be part of. So, mm-hmm. So that's what I'm doing now. I love being on stage because my story, there's a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, but I really give people the real. In fact, one of my best testimonials after Harvard was, thank God somebody came and spoke the real world issues of starting a business, because all we hear in lectures and all we see online is 5 ways to be a perfect manager, or 5 ways to increase bottom line profits, or 7 ways to, and nobody is telling it from the heart like you do. Mm. And so that's what I do on stage, and that's what's in my book. And so I love helping people that way.
So I just wanted to show the book one more time. So if you are a boomerpreneur out there and you want to start your own business, this is definitely the book for you. If you're just an entrepreneur out there and you want to start your own business, this is definitely the book for you. So be sure to run to beyondword.com/UGG UGG. You know the brand, I'm sure. And you can grab it for 30% off. And it will be signed by the famous Brian Smith, who did start the company. And so, Brian, just because we're coming close to the end of the hour, I'm curious if you had one piece of advice for either somebody who's starting a business, somebody who's struggling in a business, somebody who's created a business and is looking at creating a new one, what would that be?
Wow. I think the best piece of advice I could give for starting out on a business path is to try and figure out what you can do better than anybody else, and then do it. Now, you don't have to be the best when you start, but you have to have the desire to become the best. Mm. And if you can do that, the money will follow, but most of all, you'll have peace and happiness and hopefully passion for what you do. If you're really good at what you do, the passion will just grow and grow and grow, and then, if the money is irrelevant, if people love it, the money will flow. If it's just something for yourself, you'll have happiness. So that to me is the best piece of advice I can give.
And knowing that when you follow that, the universe will conspire to support you.
Yeah, perfect. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, and so Brian, you talk about this, you talk about the book that you're working on, and I'm just curious, you love starting businesses, so what's next for you?
I think it's going to be having a lot of fun creating the boomerpreneur group. I see, I've written a short book called The Boomerpreneur Revolution, which I will be probably, I don't know how I'll publish that yet, probably as a small ebook to start with, and then go paperback later on. And then try and put together a series of seminars or like trade shows where boomerpreneurs can come in and have a smorgasbord of opportunities to look at, to select where they do want to spend the last, or the next 10, 15 years of their lives, because there's so many opportunities out there and so many people looking for opportunities. The 50-year-olds are not that employable anymore, but they're still extremely alert and got a lot of energy. So they're realizing they're going to have to do their own thing, and thank God that's where the satisfaction is. So I think we're going to have a great retiring generation in another 10 or 15 years.
Well, that sounds so exciting. I know my parents are in that boomerpreneur area, and I know that they're definitely looking for something new. So yeah. I love that idea. Well, Brian, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being on the show. It's just been a thrill to hear all of this information about a brand that I've known since I was very, very young. So thank you for your generosity and for writing this book for people so that they really get that starting a business is messy and you can do it.
You can, you certainly can, and I look forward to signing thousands of books.
Fantastic. Well, I just want to let everybody out there know we are taking next week off in honor of the Thanksgiving holiday, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you for inviting us into your lives and having us be a part of your education for the year. We will continue to bring you new and fascinating authors just like Brian and many, many others. And the week after next week, we will have Dr. Sue Morter. She is going to help us discover our energy code and figure out how we can use that to break through obstacles that we've created for ourselves that we don't even know that we've created. So come back in 2 weeks from today on Wednesday, as always, at 1 p.m. Pacific. We'll see you then. Thank you so much. Bye.